Hey everybody, welcome back to my training channel, creating the new video on Angular 20. Angular 20 was released in May 2025. In this video, we will be looking the new features of Angular 20, some of the features which are released, and we'll do some small practicals on the new features. So let's dive into it and look for what's new in Angular 20. First and foremost thing, now the standalone components in Angular are by default. So it will be a lesser code, cleaner code, and it is good for micro frontends and modular apps. Second feature is signal based reactivity. Now signals are fully stable in your Angular 20. It was released in 17 version and now they are fully finally stable. So it gives you faster performance and more reliable change detection. Third feature is new control flow syntax. Now, finally, in the version 20, they have bid a goodbye to ng if and ng for that was used in your loops inside your HTML of Angular. Instead, you have to use @if and for syntax. We'll be looking a small practical on this. So the code will be more cleaner and more reliable templates. Second is deferred loading with @defer. So lazy loading is inbuilt in it. So it will load faster initial load images, improved user experience. Automatic zone optimization. So it is zoneless. Now zoneless is automated inside it. We'll check in the code where it is implemented. And so it will be smoother rendering and better compatibility. Performance improvement, that is, it is 45% faster rendering than the other Angular versions because the bundle size is become small. The CLI has support for development tools for signals. Testing is made simpler. Seamless integration with NX and Angular Universal. Early support for AI tools, Copilot and Tab 9. They have not fully implemented it, but the AI support is getting inside. Next, what will be the rising stars which will be adding in it? So NGRX signals for state management, Angular Material 3, Tailwind officially supported with CLI plugin. So these are the features of Angular. Migration is made easy. So for that migration, it will be a simpler command to migrate from the lower version to higher version and backward compatibility with legal APIs. That is legacy APIs. So these are the features which we'll be working on in this Angular tutorial or training session. Now, first and foremost, for the new version of Angular, what you want is you have the latest version of Node. So right now you can see that I have updated my Node to 22 version. If you haven't updated, then you have to update the version for creating the applications in Angular 20. So let's create a new project. So for that, the command is ng new and ang 20. So it will ask you, do you want to create a zoneless application without the zone.js? So if I say yes, it will be a zoneless application. It again asks for the CSS. We take standard CSS. And it is saying that self server side rendering SSR has to be implemented or not. I say yes. And it will create the application. After this application is created, we'll check the structure, small modification in the structure layout of that Angular. So which helps it to load more faster. So it says the application is created. So we can just open with the short code and Angular 20 train. So it loads the code inside your Angular 20 VS Code. So you can observe the structure. You can see that in your source file, you a small miniature changes that you don't have that module file. Over here also you can see that the structure is mostly similar, but there are some changes that standalone is permanent inside your Angular 20. Now let's create first component. That is, we create a component for implementing that if loops, that is new if and control structure. So for that we open the terminal, we go into terminal and we create the new component ng generate component and component name. I'll give it as dashboard. This will create the dashboard component. Now after the dashboard component is created, we start the coding of it. What we will be doing is we will be creating an interface over here. So first and foremost, let's create an interface. That is, that interface should be at the top of the component. Now for standalone, what we have to do is we have to type standalone over here. That will be doing afterwards. First, let's create the component. I just want to show you the error which happens if we don't give standalone over here. So for that, we just create the component. So interface, and we give the name as interface as tasks. We want to create tasks. We just give ID, role style as number. That is done. And then I give a status string, that is the status of the task. So status, and I give three values to it, three defined values. I want it pending. Second I want is in progress. Third value I want is completed. So these are the three predefined values which we want. Next interface we want is we create an interface as employee supposedly. Now inside employee, we will be giving this name that should be string. So I define it as string. Next thing is logged in, a boolean variable, which will define that whether the employee is logged in or not. Third is role, whether he is an employee or an admin. So I'll be giving two values over here again, as we did in tasks. We give two values as admin, then a pipe sign, and we give employee. And we give e tasks. Now e-tasks, what I want to do is we want to save tasks inside it, multiple tasks, which will be filled with an array. So I give a variable as tasks. So we call the upper interface inside it. So e-task will be having a type of task. So it will show, it will save basically the ID and the number, whether it is pending, in progress, or completed. So the creation of your interface is complete. Now over here in my class, what we'll be doing is, so now we create an object of employee, that is emp. We create as employee. We specify a pipe sign if it is null, equals to curly bracket, and over here it should pop up the properties which we defined over here. So it is popping up name. So inside name I'll just give my own name, that is string. So I specify as my name over here. The next value is your is logged in variable. So is logged in, I keep it as true because it is boolean. Next value is role. So if I want to give the role as admin, so it will pop up the values which are predefined there. So it will show it over here. And the e-tasks. Now e-tasks are multiple array. So we specify a square bracket. Inside that square bracket, we will be specifying three values. So it is ID. ID is 1. Then second value status. Status should be pending. So this is one value. I specify comma over here. Next value, copy and paste, and I just change the values over here in progress. Just let it pop up so there is no typo mistakes. And one, I keep it as complete. I change the IDs over here. So the employee object is created over here using the interfaces which we defined over here. Now we create a function over here, toggle, and we define a toggle employee function. I give the name as toggle EMP, and inside that function, I say this dot EMP equals to this dot EMP ternary operator, whether it is null or not, null colon, I give a curly bracket over here, and I just want to split the name. So what I do is I have the same object, so I specify the same thing over here. So this function basically does what? It just toggles the on off thing. It will just show and close this particular emily value. So I just copied the same value over here. So inside that toggle function, we declared a toggling method over here. Now what we want to do is we want to implement this inside your HTML, that is your HTML of your Dexbook component. So there is some error, I guess. Let me check. What is it? It's fine. So let's go inside your component over here. I remove the default text over here, that is h1, and I define h1 over here to define employees over here. Now over here what we will be doing is we will be implementing the new if loop and a button which will be calling that toggle method. So we define a button over here. Inside that button, the old way of calling the method is click, and on click what I want to do is I want to call the toggle function. So it should be EMP. So that function is done. And I just say toggle employee. That is done over here. Now is the syntax change, that is control style of and your 20. Instead of ng if, we write @if, @if, and define as EMP. If the employee exists, then you go inside. We define h2 over here. We just say welcome. I just want to print the name of the employee. So we define it inside this, and EMP dot, it should pop up. So it pops up the name. So it is defined over here. We define a P. Inside P, we give a message as you are logged in as, and I want to print the role. So we use two-way binding over here again, and then say employee dot role. That is printed over here. Now I want to print the task of this employee. So I give the S3 and title in my tasks. This is defined again. And for that multiple task, I'll be using UL. And inside UL, we generally used to call the for loop. So for loop also should follow the new control syntax. So for that, we just say @for. We define as @for, and I define a single variable, that is tasks of emp dot tasks. Task termination, and say track task dot id. Variable is the task termination. So the new syntax would be @for single task of employee dot is tasks, that is an array which we define inside, track by task ID. So that is the primary key. We can define it that way. Now inside that for, we'll be printing inside li. So we specify a li over here, and in li, I just print as tasks, the task number which I want to print. So I give over here, and now it is inside your task variable. So task dot id. Everything is inside this variable. So each and every task travels inside this. So it will print the task ID. I print a dash dash dash. Then I want to print it using a switch statement. So now switch syntax also, we can use the new method, that is at the rate switch. At the rate switch, and I say tasks dot status. Task dot status. We define case. So again, case will be defined as at the rate case. And at the rate case, it is popping up me in the bracket pending. So if it is pending, what it should print, I define a span over here. Give your class as text dash warning. I print as pending. So this is one case. We define two more cases. One for your in progress. In progress. We change the class. This is your bootstrap class. I print in progress. And inside here, it is completed. We define it as completed. Over here, we will be giving as dash, and we define it as success. And over here, we change the condition to completed. I'm just checking that the spelling, the type of in progress is same. Go inside, I just double click and copy. Paste it over here. Sorry. So there is no typo mistake. So this is done. And after this, if loop, for loop, and case statement, we have to complete the UL. So UL is completed over here. And after that, there will be else. So this is my main loop if, that is condition, and say at the rate else, define it. Please log in. So this is statement. Now we want to call this component directly inside your app. So we go to the app. First and foremost, let me run the application, whether it is running perfectly. So just say ng serve. It starts building and the application is running. So it is having the default HTML. Now we remove all the default things, and we used to call like this inside your old structure. Now as you give, it is saying app dashboard component is not a known element. Why? Because in 20, you can call the component directly inside your app only if this is a standalone version. If this particular thing is a standalone version, only then you can call it directly. So you have to define standalone equals to true over here. As I said, I want you to see the error first, and then I can explain it well. So you go over here in your component where it is written this. So you can just say standalone and you define it as true. This is defined. Now we try to call. Now you can see that your component is running over here. Now, as I said, this printing is using the new control structure of if and here for. If you click on toggle, it will just on off this particular employee. So this is your practical implementation of your new if, for, and switch statement, which can be written using your case. This was implemented and started in your 17 version, but now this is fixed. You cannot use the old syntax, that is at the rate ngif, because it is depreciated now. So you'll be using only this new control flow structure, that is at the rate if. So this is your first change example. Now next, what we are going to see is about the signals. Using the signals, we will be implementing it as it is in your Angular 20. So for that, we create a new component. I just stop the running, and again I say nggc, and we create a new component as form component. I want to implement the signals inside your forms. So this component is created. Now, as you know, we priorly write as standalone, and we do it true first and foremost, so that does not hinder again. So this is done. And thereafter, I define a signal over here. So I say name, and I give it as a signal. And inside that signal, we pass a blank value. That signal has to be imported in your Angular core. So that is done over here. Now I define two Boolean computed values. Now signal works in that way. The computed thing will detect the change, and inside that change, it will call the signal or invoke the signal. So I say is name valid. I want to check whether the name entered is valid or not. So I give it inside computed. And in computed, we will be giving your ES6 function, that is arrow function. This dot name, that is signal, dot trim, dot length is greater than equal to 3. I want to check whether the entered value is greater than 3, then you have to make it true. So again, next thing I want to check is form valid. So next variable is form valid equals to, I again call computed. In computed, again ES6 function, and that ES6 function should be pointing an arrow. So that is arrow function. This dot is name valid. So this depends on the computed value of is name valid. So if is name is valid, then is form valid will be true. So that is defined over here, and we type it, we complete it. These two things are done. Now we type a function for submission of the form. Inside that submit, what we do is we first of all just take if is, that is this dot is form valid. If the form is valid, then I just want to alert, and alert is submitting the form. That is done. Next thing is else condition. In else, I'll just say form is invalid. So I again give alert symbol over here, that is alert. And inside that, I say form invalid. So the things which you want to do in your component, we have done. We defined a signal. We gave a boolean, that is we did the chain detection of the signal in computed method. So computed this dot name dot trim dot length is greater than 3. If this is greater than 3, then this will be true, and the form value will be true if this particular value is true. If the first boolean is true, then the form valid is true. So now we want to implement the HTML of this inside the signals. So we go in the form, I again remove this h1 and I type as user form. And inside that user form, I just print a label. So first and foremost, I just give a label over here, and in that label, I just defined as name, and I give a input type text. I don't need anything over here because I want to directly bind it to the signal. So for binding it, we use the method as square bracket value, and in that value, I give the signal name. It should pop up automatically. Otherwise, there is some error or problem. And on input, what I want to do, that is input name dot set, because I want to set the value of the signal. So name dot set, and we have to set the value of this particular variable only, that is this particular text box only. So we give it as at the rate, that is $any, and any after that I give as $event dot target dot value. So typing this will take the text box value and bind it to the name signal. So this is done over here. I give a slash, so we don't want to complete it over here. And now I want to give a button over here. So for that button, I just give a button over here, and inside button, I want to give a condition. I want to disable the button when the is form valid is not true. So that is not is form valid. Then this would be disabled. And we want to give a condition also. That is condition is click. So we give the event as click. So on click, what should be done? So on click, the submit function should be called. So this is done, and I type it submit over here. Also, I want to give a error message over here. If it is not valid, it should print that the value should be greater than 3 or something. So for that, I defined as if, and in that if I give as not is name valid, then what it should do? It should print inside a div. So that div is name should be greater than 3 characters. So this is done. So what we did is we created a form, we created an input value, we binded it with the signal over here. The signal should take the value from the text box itself. So we have given as event.target.value, that will take the value from this own text box and set it to the name. And we gave a if loop again, that is the new syntax at the rate if is name valid, then not is name valid, then we give it as you should enter more than 3 characters. And I want the button to be disabled if the form is not valid. So if we type only 2 characters, then this won't enable and you can submit over here. And on click, we call the submit method over here. Now we want to call this component also. So we go in app HTML and we call it below this. We can call it app form component. This is done. Now let's run it. Say ng serve. If all is well, then it should run. So the form is displayed over here. You can see the form over here. If I type 2 characters, this won't enable. If I type 3 characters, it gets enabled because our validation is satisfied. If I click on submit, it just says submitting the form. So this is how the signals are implemented inside your form in your Angular 20. This is a small example just to explain how signals work. And main was about the control flow structure, that is at the rate if, sorry, yeah, at the rate if and for loops. So that was defined inside this. So instead of ngif, we'll be doing at the rate if, at the rate for, at the rate switch. So this was about your new features of your Angular 20. I will be bringing more tutorial on implementation of the new features in near future. Till then, you can join the channel for updates and keep learning. Thank you for watching.